Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about rents. Rents are particularly high, I think, all across the Western world, particularly in the big cities, but in Australia, rents in places like Sydney are astronomical, certainly what they used to be. And I'll talk a little bit about how they used to be and how easy it was to rent a place sort of in years gone by compared to sort of how difficult it can be today. Now, there's been a slew and a range of articles all across the media by the entire media landscape, really, about how high rents are and how they affect minorities. But none of these pieces, certainly that I've seen, deal with the issues such as why are rents so high? What are the factors causing it? Why has the government brazenly, and Western governments generally, why have Western governments brazenly permitted and allowed and encouraged the forces and circumstances and causations that have brought these high rents into being? And remember, there is nothing organic, natural, or market-driven about the rents. Nothing at all. While people's incomes have been declining, rents have been increasing. In fact, rents have been increasing at nearly 3 times the rate of income. Now, that can't happen in a market-driven economy. People simply can't afford those rents. So people, you can't, landlords or property owners or whatever, they can't rent out their properties to people when in a competitive marketplace. If people's purchasing power is declining as swiftly as it is in regard to rents, then property owners just can't rent their properties out. So there's a number of factors causing these rent increases, or property price increases generally. It could be purchasing a property as well as rent, but looking at rent for the moment. But these aren't covered in all these pieces that I saw. These causes, if they're mentioned at all, it's a footnote. But they focus on human interest, or try to turn it into human interest stories. Like Billie Jean is a single mother with 3 children, and she can't afford the rent in her simple, fairly basic property. Then there's a shot of Billie Jean having a good cry. Then there'll be a black lesbian social worker will say how terrible things are. So they'll turn it into a left-wing Marxist parable type story of the evils of the capitalist system or whatever, and also how hard done by Billie Jean is, and she's a single mother, she's this, she's that. So now that they then pick another, that Billie Jean was white, they then pick Shaniqua, who's black, and say that she's suffering because of the high rents, and they turn it into a uniquely a victim story. It's a victim story, and that's it. And they won't address the issues I mentioned, and this I find very annoying. So let's just have a little look. Before, in the months leading up to the beginning of the COVID lockdowns and the dramas in and around COVID, the restrictions and so on, looking at that, there were the amount of properties for rent since then to now have declined, and using Sydney as an example, have declined by just over 60%. So this is an astonishing decline. Now, bear in mind this decline in the number of properties for rent has occurred when there was the lockdowns in place. So, but when there was a sharp drop in immigration during that time, and there was also a big boost in the amount of people who, say, were on short-term work visas, student visas, things like that, who returned back to the countries they came from, places like India and China and so on. So there was this massive outgoing of people, and also there was, as I say, the reduction in migration. So you had 2 big effects there. So you'd think just on the face of that, so assuming market-driven forces, you would think there would be a huge boost in the amount of properties up for rent. You think there would be this big increase. You'd think, given again the amount of people involved, you'd think there would at least be a 30% plus increase in properties for rent. But not so. The reverse occurred. Even though there were fewer people looking for places to rent, the amount of properties available declined by 60%. So clearly, again, this is not market forces. These are people who are simply shutting up the front door of their property for rent, just closing it up and saying, okay, I'm going to sit on this until I can get the prices I want. So that given the amount of properties for rent declined so sharply, rents increased. That is a sort of a market force thing, but you've got the same amount of people chasing the properties, or fewer people, but then a markedly fewer amount of properties there. So the rents should have gone down. They should have gone down big time, but they didn't. The rents continued to climb, and the amount of properties available continued to increase, and the amount of time it took to rent a property increased. Now, in a market-driven situation, if you've got fewer people chasing the properties and it's taking you longer to rent them from the time you advertise them and make them available, then in any market-driven economy, the rents would come down. They wouldn't go up; they'd come down. So, but the reverse occurred. That fewer people looking for places to rent, longer to rent a place, but rents went up sharply in that time. Now, I just to sort of give some personal stories. There's it was a relative's son, and he's I don't know, 22, and he's never rented anything before, but he wanted to get out on his own, and not a poor family, so they were kind of subsidising him. So it wasn't like he was looking at the basic of the basic, but he was. I said I'd help him, and so we were looking at places, and I was trying to sort of point out to him how it works and how you do it. You go to an inspection and you do this and you fill out these forms and so on. So I went through that with him, and but I was surprised. We'd go and, for example, I'll round off numbers here, but we'd go and look at a place that he'd picked out that was say $100 a week, and there would be a big turnout, and usually big turnout. Instead of sometimes you go and no one turns up to look, but other times there's a big turnout. So it's quite a big turnout in this place. It's a nice place, actually. So there's a big turnout, and so he said he wanted it. So I sat with him, on the call to the real estate to confirm that we wanted to proceed, or he wanted to proceed, and the real estate said, yeah, look, we got a really good turnout there for people coming to look. So, we've decided to make the rent $200 instead of $100. And so, well, can you do that? Now that's actually illegal, but so I quickly got onto their website, the real estate's website, and it was still listed for $100, even though he was saying it was now, the real estate agent was saying it's now $200. So I pointed out, say, hey, buddy, it's listed for $100. You can't do this, So, and the guy's attitude was, hey, I can ask $200 and I can get it. I just haven't had time to change it on the website, so I don't care. But it's illegal what I'm doing. Don't care. Sue me if you don't like it. In the meanwhile, fuck you. And by the way, I've got your name, and I'm not going to rent this place to you anyway. So get lost, motherfucker. And it was that sort of attitude, extremely mercenary. So we shook up. The kid was got a bit shook up by that. Oh, gee, well, that's a tactic, doesn't work. So I tried to explain to him it was illegal, and he didn't understand. If it's illegal, why are they doing it? Well, because they think they can get away with it. That's why. Very, very much current year thinking that. So this idea of that there's some sort of actual shortage of properties to rent. And there's a huge market demand out there for properties. That's bullshit. Some of the good ones maybe, but the situation is there are no market forces at work, and if there are any at all, they're artificially contrived. As in, you don't suddenly lose 60% of your properties to rent when you've got no one looking to rent them. So that's people just pulling property off the market to artificially create a shortage. So. Now, the two examples. I mean, I'm sure there's more, but the two examples that I've seen of, and they focused very much on single mothers with children and so on. It's not, they misrepresent the media pieces, misrepresented. They're trying to create a sob story and a human interest sob story about oppression and wickedness and evil, capitalism and real estate's a straight white males, that sort of thing. So they're trying to just create or go along with this current narrative of the oppressed peoples and so on, rather than actually deal with the issues. Now, if they'd done a proper article, they'd have gone, well, hold on a minute, why are so many offshore investors allowed to come in and buy property? There's many countries where they're not allowed to, or you have to pay a huge fee to do it. But in Australia, they're just allowed to come in, these multi-gazillionaire, Chinese and Brahmins and anywhere in the world, the big investment companies like BlackRock and so on, they're allowed to come in and compete directly with, the mums and the dads and the moms and the pops, with their basic jobs and their couple of kids that are trying to just buy a home to live in, and those people with their limited incomes and limited ability are having to compete with these cashed up gazillionaires coming from all sides. And these offshore investors are wanting to create portfolios of 100, 200, 300, 400 houses or properties, and they're doing that, and they're not. There's no restriction to them doing this, and whatever restrictions that are put in their place, they effortlessly skirt around them by using local nominees and putting the heavies on local, say, Chinese living here, and say, you're going to buy those 3 properties in your name, and I'll put them in your name. And if you don't do that, your grandmother back in China is going to cop it, okay? And this sort of thing. So the nominee system is outrageously exploited to skirt property investment laws or restrictions, the very few that do exist. So why don't we have stories about that? There should be a lot of pressure being put on the body politic all across the West about the lax procedures, or not lax, they're encouraging this, of offshore investors just crowding out the local buyers. And I've been to property auctions and had a look, and you just watch the offshore investors, not always, but mostly Chinese. And I speak passable Mandarin, so I can sort of listen to what's going on. And they're there with their interpreters and their nominee flunkies, and they just walk from auction to auction, in just one geographical area, just buying one property after the other without even blinking or breaking a sweat. And they can burn gazillions of dollars just in one day's of purchasing property. And the local people, again, the moms and the pops with a couple of kids, they're knocked out in the first couple of rounds of bidding, and you can see the look of forlorn hopelessness on their face as they walk away from yet another disappointment. But they can't compete with that. If they were competing with only local people who also had local jobs and local means, then they would be able to compete. So this whole situation is forcing a non-competition out there. Now, coming back to the 2 single mums, it's not hard to dig up, if you go online, to dig up information on these people, and even find in some cases their social media accounts. And now, one of them has decided that she's got a job, but she decides that she wants to live near a beach suburb. Now she's living in an area where the rent is quite high. There'd be plenty of places she could rent that would be quite a bit cheaper than that, but that's where she wants to live. She wants a certain lifestyle, and she wants to live in this beach area or near to beach area. And fine if you want to do that, if you've got the means to do it. But she wants to do that, and she's determined to do that, which means that she's really struggling to get by, given that lifestyle choice. So now, when that wasn't mentioned in the piece, the video piece that I saw. Maybe it was in originally, and they edited it out to sort of make sure that the victim's story was at fever pitch. But that's that's why she's got an issue. It's not that I'm suggesting it would be easy. The rents are still high generally, and I understand that. But in their desperation to create a victim story, they leave out that hugely material point that she could be easily saving herself hundreds of dollars a week by not living near the beach. Now, in the other case, the woman in question is a spendthrift. She's very careless with money, and if she sees an advertisement somewhere, or she goes to a shop and she can't help herself, she's got to spend money, got to buy it. So she's got numerous debts from credit cards and shopping cards and all sorts of debts coming in because she's got to buy all the stuff that she actually doesn't want or need. But her argument you find on social media is that advertisements advertising products for sale should not be allowed because she can't help herself. She's got to buy it, and therefore it's the fault of the advertiser or the product manufacturer in making her buy it. And she is thus a victim yet again. So this is just someone who can't manage money. Again, she's employed. Now, there was a third story about two people who are working, a white couple actually, working full time, but they can't afford to pay rent. But again, the story is a misrepresentation. They again have huge personal debts, living a lifestyle that they can't afford. So they're now unable to pay the rent because of all the other commitments that they've got, and they want to live in an area that has is beyond their means. They want to live in a nice tree-lined street type area, and they can't really afford that under the circumstances. So with their careless spendthrift ways and again the same thing, their desire to live in a nicer area, they can't make it work. So all the stories there I think in reality fail to miss the mark in their desperation to create a victim narrative. They're not addressing the issues, but we really do need to address the issues in the West. Why were all these offshore investors allowed to come in and buy up shitloads of property? Why were they allowed to do that? Why was there no checks or restrictions or limitations? And the limitations that were put in place are just so irrelevant and can be so easily bypassed that they're worthless in effect. So why is that? Why now are all certainly in Australia, politicians, more than 50% of their income results from real estate speculation and real estate deals? And why is it that politicians in particular seem to have this incredible ability to buy undervalued real estate assets and then to, within a short space of time, a year or two at most, why are they able to sell them at well above market price to an offshore investor? So some of the politicians, particularly the more senior politicians, that have signed off on legislation that benefits the offshore investors and benefits the big banks. Some of these politicians are worth 50, 60, 70 million dollars, just nearly all of it from real estate speculation. It's not from their salaries or being shrewd investors or anything like that. Far from it. So why are the political class now? Why is their income primarily dependent on real estate deals and real estate speculation? At the same time as they're allowing all these offshore investors to come in. I mean, what it means is our political class in the West have without a thought, have sold us out to the globalist investor class, based on the promise that hey, we'll let you guys get rich out of it as well. It's just those voters in the electorate, they're the ones that are going to have to suffer, and that's just too fucking bad. But again, I haven't seen a single article that's pushed by the mainstream media that directly addresses the causes of the rents going insane and of rent, high rents, and why the sudden shortages of rent. Why are people allowed? Why are investors and property owners allowed to just shut up their properties and make not have them available for rent? Why are they even allowed to do that? And also claim tax deductions from the cost of ownership. There's a lot of questions to be looked at here and gone into, and I can't see anyone even touching it or coming close. But until we do have this conversation, the population is getting screwed. We really need to also to understand that while rents are increasing at three times the rate of income, that the local population across the West are getting screwed, royally screwed over as a result of this. And of course, standard of living is going down. Just if you look at someone, getting paid, say, an average income, the rent would take up, I'm just doing some sums in my head here, but the rent would take up an average rent on an average house, not in a fancy suburb, sort of a middle suburb. Rent would take up almost 80% of the income. So it's clearly not possible for someone on an average wage to rent a modest house. This would be a freestanding house I'm talking here. And even if they were to say rent a 1-2 bedroom, fairly compact apartment, they would still be looking at 55% of their income would go in rent. So that again illustrates the extent of the unaffordability of rent in well, I'm using Sydney as an example here, but really in any large Western city, I think at the moment, such as London and New York and whatnot. Now it's a little bit different for people who come from third world countries, because they'll live. 20 people will crowd into a 2-bedroom apartment, and so they're not only able to pay a bit more rent than say just a local person would, but they're also prepared to live in those sort of conditions, because that's as good or better than they had. If they come from, say, somewhere like India, they'd be living with that sort of density anyway. But in the West, they get this. They get running water. They get drinking water. You can drink out of the tap or the faucet. You get flushing toilets. You get electric lights that switch on. You get all these sort of things. So you get all those benefits. So to them, it's still not a bad gig, living 20 to a 2-bedroom apartment, and you see that with the Chinese as well. They can live shifts on bunk beds they've got bunk beds put all around the lounge and the whatever the bedrooms are, and a hallway and that sort of thing, and they can live a gazillion people to a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment quite easily, and do, and I've seen it. So there are those sorts of things. Why are those things being allowed? Why are those things being, because it's illegal to do that. Why are those things being allowed? So there needs to be a real root and branch examination of this. And if the offshore investors are denied, their tax deductibility and their tax write-offs and all that sort of thing, they'll dump the property pretty quickly. But there needs to be a transition where they gradually lose that deductibility over a period of years, so that it can be a soft and gentle landing, and that affordability can be returned. Now, I look back over, say, rents, when I was, just out of school, just out of college, that sort of thing, and the rents that I was paying. Now, I'm thinking now, I had this is a 2-bedroom furnished apartment, walk to beach, and I was paying 28% of my income was going on rent, and I'm still a young guy at this point, 21, 22, whatever. So that's the amount of rent that. So in proportion to my total income, the amount of rent I was paying back then. Again, this was a 2-bedroom furnished apartment. Walk to the beach, walk to the downtown. It was a great location. And that wasn't anywhere near one of the cheapest places. I could have got cheaper than that. So 28% of my net income, that's, after the tax and all that sort of thing's been taken out. So that was the thing. Now today, that same apartment, now I'd be paying again, close to, this is assuming an average wage, I'd be paying again, 75% plus of my income in rent. I think the first place I ever rented, it was, we took up 20% of, this was a 1-bedroom apartment, 20% of my net income. Again, the income after tax and everything's been taken out. So, but if I look at that same apartment today, it's I'm just doing some sums in my head here. That would be more than 50% of an average income. Paying the rent. The rent would be more than 50% of the average income. It's a 1-bedroom apartment. That was actually a good apartment. There was a sort of a major bus terminal, maybe a few hundred meters down the road, and that was another walk to beach type place, walk to shops and so on. So this was this sort of illustrates the difference in costs. So what we're seeing now with the way rents are increasing at a faster rate than incomes is that communal living will be the only way moving forward that the average worker and average citizen can pay for accommodation, have a roof over their head. So there's going to have to be at least 2 average wage income earners in the house, and maybe another 1 or 2 supplementary income earners as well. Like maybe the kids stay on in the house, with the folks, and their income is put into the communal pot to pay for all the expenses. Because really, there's quite a small number of people now who can afford to rent. You'd need to be in the top, say, 15% of income earners to be able to live independently now. That's how restricted that's become. Whereas, it used to be 75, 80% of income earners could live independently. Now it's down to about 15%. And our politicians have a lot to answer for. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.